Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Health Q&A.
Great to be back.
Today, we're going to explore some common foods, foods that some people choose to avoid. It's part of a specific dietary approach called the Autoimmune Protocol, or AIP.
That's right. And this approach, it involves temporarily removing certain foods. The thinking is that these foods might contribute to inflammation or, gut issues for certain individuals.
Exactly. So we'll look at 10 of the sort of top foods often avoided in the early stages of AIP, and importantly, why they're avoided.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how foods we often think of as healthy can sometimes cause trouble, especially for people managing autoimmune conditions.
It really is. And this isn't about saying these foods are bad for everyone, right?
Not at all. It's a targeted elimination phase, really, to help you understand your own personal sensitivities.
Okay, let's dive in. First up, grains. We're talking wheat, barley, rice staples for so many. Why do they often get the boot early on in AIP?
Well, the main reason comes down to certain proteins they contain, storage proteins. Gluten in wheat is obviously the most famous one.
Right.
But these proteins generally can potentially damage the intestinal lining and increase inflammation.
Okay, damage the lining. You hear about leaky gut, increased permeability. Is that related?
Absolutely. Gluten and related proteins, called prolamins, are thought to contribute to that increased permeability. Think of your gut lining like a gatekeeper, a very selective one.
Okay.
When it becomes more permeable or leaky, larger bits of undigested food, like fragments of these grain proteins, can slip through into the bloodstream.
And the immune system sees those as invaders.
Precisely. It can perceive them as foreign threats and launch an immune reaction, leading to inflammation.
So, okay, even if someone's specifically choosing gluten-free grains like rice or corn, they might still need to avoid them on AIP, at least initially.
That's often the case, yes. While gluten is a major player, other components in gluten-free grains can sometimes still be problematic for sensitive individuals. Different proteins, maybe carbohydrates.
Got it. So practically speaking, that means things like bread, pasta, cereals, even rice are usually out during that first phase.
Yep, generally pause to see how the body responds without them.
Okay, that's a key point. Now, what about dairy? Milk, cheese, yogurt, another huge food group. What's the issue there for AIP?
Dairy brings its own set of potential issues, mainly the proteins, casein and whey. For some people, these can be highly immunogenic.
Immunogenic meaning they provoke an immune response.
Exactly. They have a high potential to do that. And there's this really interesting concept called molecular mimicry that sometimes comes into play with dairy.
Molecular mimicry? Sounds complex. What's that about?
Well, the idea is that certain parts of these dairy proteins, especially casein peptides, might look structurally similar to some of our own body tissues. So when your immune system goes after the foreign casein, it might get confused, so to speak, and mistakenly target those similar-looking human tissues as well.
Wow. So it could potentially trigger or worsen an autoimmune attack?
That's the theoretical concern, yes. It's one potential mechanism being explored.
So it's not just about lactose intolerance then?
No, definitely not just lactose intolerance, although that can certainly cause digestive upset. The AIP focus is more on these potential immune reactions to the dairy proteins.
Sure.
Even if you don't have a full-blown allergy, low-level reactions to casein or whey could still contribute to gut irritation or dysbiosis.
That's the imbalance in gut bacteria, right?
Yeah, exactly. An unhealthy balance of the microbes living in your gut.
Yeah.
Removing dairy aims to reduce those potential triggers and let things calm down.
Makes sense. Okay, moving on. Legumes. Beans, lentils, soy, even peanuts. Why are these often on the avoid list initially?
Legumes contain compounds, notably lectins and phytates. These are sometimes called anti-nutrients.
Anti-nutrients. Why that term?
Because they can interfere with nutrient absorption or potentially irritate the gut. Lectins, for example, found in things like kidney beans or peas, can actually bind to the cells lining your intestine.
And what does that binding do?
It can potentially increase intestinal permeability, contributing to that leaky gut situation we mentioned earlier. Phytates, on the other hand, can bind to the minerals like zinc or iron, making them harder for your body to absorb.
So again, it's not that they're inherently bad foods, but for someone with a sensitive system, these compounds could be an extra burden.
That's a good way to put it. It's about reducing potential irritants during a healing phase.
And you included peanuts and soy in that group.
Yes. Peanuts are botanically legumes, not nuts, so they fall into this category. And soy, with its own lectins and phytates, is also typically avoided in the initial phase.
Good clarification. Okay, next, Nightshade vegetables, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, potatoes. It seems so healthy. What's the issue?
Right, they are packed with nutrients, but they also contain naturally occurring compounds called alkaloids, like solanine in potatoes, tomatine in tomatoes, capsaicin in chili peppers, and also some lectins.
Alkaloids and lectins. Are these the plant's defense mechanisms?
Essentially, yes, they help protect the plant. But in some sensitive individuals, particularly those with existing gut inflammation or autoimmunity, these compounds can be irritating.
Irritating how? Like worsening inflammation?
Potentially, yes. They might exacerbate gut inflammation or permeability. For instance, some studies suggest certain lectins in tomatoes or potatoes might increase that leakiness in the gut lining.
Okay, so it's another case of generally healthy, but maybe not for everyone right now. What are some common nightshades people avoid on AIP?
Well, you mentioned the main ones. Tomatoes, all peppers, bell and jelly, eggplant, white potatoes. Sweet potatoes are usually okay, though. Also, tomatillos and spices derived from peppers like paprika, cayenne, chili powder.
Wow, that cuts out a lot of common spices too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about eggs. You mentioned specifically egg whites earlier. Why eggs?
Eggs, especially the whites, are a relatively common food sensitivity. The main protein in egg white is albumin, and there's also an enzyme called lysozyme. Both of these can provoke immune reactions in susceptible people.
So specific components again, is there more to it?
There's also a theory, a hypothesis really, that some components in egg whites might actually help transport other foreign proteins across the gut barrier.
Sort of like opening the gate for other troublemakers?
Kind of, yeah. Potentially amplifying inflammation that way. And anecdotally, many people with autoimmune conditions do report symptom flares after eating eggs.
So on AIP, is it just the whites or the whole egg?
Typically, both the whites and the yolks are removed initially. The goal is maximum trigger reduction to start.
Even the nutrient-rich yolks?
Yes, initially. Later, during the reintroduction phase, egg yolks are often one of the first things people try adding back in carefully to see how they tolerate them. But in the strict elimination phase, the whole egg is usually out.
Got it. It's about finding those individual triggers. What about nuts and seeds? Almonds, walnuts, chia, flax, often touted as superfoods.
They definitely have benefits, but also a few potential downsides in the context of AIP's elimination phase. They're quite high in phytic acid, like legumes, which can hinder mineral absorption. And some people find them, well, just harder to digest fully.
I think I've also heard concerns about mold with nuts and seeds.
That's another point, yeah. Depending on how they're stored, they can sometimes accumulate mold toxins, which could be an additional burden on the immune system. Plus, they're often eaten roasted with oils or ground into butters, which might involve processing or oils that aren't ideal during this phase.
So the overall observation is that they can be triggers for some people's autoimmune symptoms.
That's the observation within the AIP community, yes, which is why they're excluded initially.
And that includes nut butters, seed butters. What about seed-based spices like pepper?
Absolutely. All nuts, seeds, and their butters are out. And yes, seed-derived spices like black pepper, cumin, coriander, sesame, mustard seeds, those are typically removed too.
Wow, okay. Lots to keep track of. Let's shift gears to something many consume daily. Refined sugars and sweeteners. Where does AIP stand on those?
So those are definitely out. Refined sugars, white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and artificial sweeteners are pretty much universally restricted on AIP.
Why is that? Just empty calories or more?
Much more. They're known to actively fuel inflammation. They can also really mess with your gut bacteria balance, feeding the less beneficial kinds, contributing to that dysbiosis again.
How do they fuel inflammation directly?
Well, high sugar intake is linked to increased production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Those are signaling molecules that basically tell your body to ramp up inflammation. Sugar also causes insulin spikes, can weaken the gut barrier.
And impair the immune system.
Yes, it can interfere with proper immune function and potentially worsen autoimmune symptoms. It's a multi-pronged negative effect, really.
What about natural sweeteners like honey or maple syrup?
Even those are generally used very, very sparingly on AIP, if at all, during the strictest phase. While they're less processed, they can still feed certain gut microbes you might not want proliferating, and they still cause blood sugar and insulin spikes. The goal is to minimize those swings.
Right, minimize disruptions. Okay, what about the big category of processed foods and additives? Seems likely these would be avoided too.
Oh, absolutely. Highly processed packaged foods are a definite no on AIP. For one, they often bundle together multiple ingredients that are already on the avoidance list. refined grains, maybe dairy derivatives, sugar, problematic oils.
A combination of triggers.
Exactly. And then on top of that, they usually contain various artificial additives.
What kind of additives are we talking about?
Things like trans fats, artificial colors, artificial flavors, MSG, preservatives, often loads of sodium. Plus, ingredients like carrageenan or certain emulsifiers sometimes found in processed foods have been shown in some studies to potentially irritate the gut lining or activate immune cells.
So they're often low in nutrients and high in potential irritants.
Pretty much. The whole philosophy of AIP leans heavily towards whole, unprocessed, single-ingredient foods. Strip away the variables.
Makes sense. You mentioned problematic oils. Let's talk about industrial vegetable and seed oils, canola, corn, soybeans, safflower oil, etc. Why avoid these?
These oils are generally very high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acids. Now, we need some omega-6, but the typical Western diet has a ratio that's way skewed towards omega-6 compared to omega-3.
And that high omega-6 intake is inflammatory.
It can promote the production of pro-inflammatory compounds in the body, yes. Things called eicosanoids. So oils like soybean, corn, canola, sunflower, safflower, they're avoided partly for that reason.
Is there another reason?
Yes, they're also often highly processed and prone to oxidation, going rancid, essentially. The heat and chemicals used in processing can damage the fats, and this oxidation creates harmful byproducts like aldehydes, which add more stress to your gut and immune system.
So what fats are encouraged on AIP?
The focus shifts to more stable fats less prone to oxidation, and often with a better fatty acid profile. Things like extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, and fats from well-sourced animal products.
Okay, that clarifies the fat situation. Lastly, let's touch on beverages. Caffeine and alcohol. They aren't foods, but why are they typically avoided during AIP's elimination phase?
Good question. Because they can definitely impact gut health and immune balance. Alcohol is pretty well known as a gut irritant.
How so?
It can directly damage the gut lining, increase intestinal permeability, that leaky gut issue again, and it contributes to systemic inflammation throughout the body.
Okay, so alcohol's out. What about caffeine? That morning cup of coffee or tea is a ritual for so many.
Yeah, it's a tough one for many people. Caffeine can stimulate cortisol release, the stress hormone. And in people who are already sensitive or inflamed, this might further aggravate the gut lining.
So coffee, regular tea, obviously alcohol, all off the table initially.
Typically, yes.
Yeah.
During the strict elimination phase, removing coffee, most teas, some herbal teas without seeds might be okay, and all alcohol helps to really stabilize gut function and reduce those potential inflammatory triggers as much as possible.
Wow. So it really sounds like the initial phase of AIP is quite comprehensive in what it removes.
It is. It's designed to be thorough in removing potential triggers. But the key, and we have to stress this, is that it's temporary.
Right. It's all geared towards calming the system down, letting the gut heal, and then systematically reintroducing foods to figure out your specific triggers.
Exactly that. It's an investigative tool, really. The goal is to gain valuable personal insights into how different foods affect your body and your specific condition.
This has been incredibly useful, breaking down the why behind avoiding each of these food groups. It's definitely not arbitrary. There are clear reasons tied to gut health and immune responses.
Absolutely. Understanding the rationale empowers you to approach it effectively. If it's something you and your healthcare provider decide is right for you, it's about informed choices on your health journey.
Thank you for your listening.